We all know the New York Islanders roster isn't perfect, but they may have the best roster in the league at this particular position. We're going to talk about that and a lot more on today's Locked On Islanders podcast.
Your Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to the Wednesday edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs are in our rearview mirror, the sports stop sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, we have got a busy show ahead of us, but first, if there's something Islanders related on your mind, if you have a question, a comment, maybe a topic you'd like us to discuss on today's show, you can email us at lockedonislanders@gmail.com. And if you leave your first name and where you're from, we're happy to mention you on the show when we discuss whatever's on your mind. You can also follow the show on X at Locked On Isles, and you can follow me, Gil Martin, on X at Ice Wars, NYR vs NYI. We'll keep you up to date on all things Islanders all year long during the offseason. That includes hirings, firings, trade rumors, free agency, the draft, and all things going on over the course of the summer. So make sure you don't miss an episode. And it's always great to talk a little Isles hockey with you, game time or anytime. Every day, as you know, we've talked over the course of this offseason about some of the concerns or the flaws that the Islanders roster has. We've talked about the lack of scoring depth. We've talked about the age of the team. We've talked about the salary cap crunch, lots of different things that have affected this team. But at the same time, there are some areas that I think we have to talk about that make this team look pretty good. And I'm going to put a question out there, and we will also put this up on our YouTube page, a little survey, a little poll, so you can head on over to YouTube and our YouTube page and vote. Where does the Islanders goaltending tandem of Ilya Sorokin and Semyon Varlamov rank in the NHL? And I think you can make a case that the Islanders have the best goaltending tandem in the National Hockey League. And look, I think you can make a case for a few other teams as well. But look at what the Islanders have right now. You have Ilya Sorokin as your starter. And the amazing thing about Sorokin is he's coming off an off year. This was his worst season in the NHL. Now, even with that, he finished eighth in the NHL in the Vezina Trophy voting. Eighth in the Vezina Trophy voting. That means that even in his worst season in the NHL, Sorokin was a top 10 goalie, according to the experts who vote on these things every year. In 2022-2023, he was second in the Vezina voting, and only Linus Ullmark of Boston, now no longer of Boston, but at that point of the Bruins, ranked higher. So you look at the numbers that Sorokin put up last year. 3.01 goals against average, .908 save percentage. Both of those numbers, by far, his worst in his 4 seasons in the NHL. And yet he still had a winning record, or at least above NHL 500. And when you look at the team the Islanders had in front of him, a team that struggled defensively, especially in the first half of the season, a team that gave up far too many shots on goal, and a team that gave up far too many quality scoring chances. You add the fact that in mid-season, Semyon Varlamov was injured, and Sorokin had to start 14 roughly games in a row. And, I think played in 15 or 16 games in a row. That definitely, you add up the shots and the games in a row, and I think it took a toll on him where he was out of gas by the end of the season. You got to also understand the way the Islanders played defensively. Injuries were a part of it. Scott Mayfield played 1 game where he was actually healthy, then missed half the season and played the other half of the season. Well, he missed the second half of the season, played the first half of the season on a broken ankle, played through it, wasn't himself. Both of your top 2 shutdown defenders in Adam Pelech and Ryan Pollock missed significant time due to injury. Again, you're looking at a situation where your defense core, you had guys like Mike Riley and Robert Bortuzzo, veterans who were picked up on waivers or for a 7th-round pick that, had to play a lot of minutes, as did Sebastian Aho, who is a liability defensively because of his lack of size, not because of his lack of effort. Again, you didn't have the best defense in front of you if you were Ilya Sorokin for most of the season. Still, Sorokin, 28 years old, will turn 29 in early August, so in a few weeks. He is in the prime of his career as a goalie. His save percentage of .908, like I said, the worst of his career. Here is a guy who led the NHL in shutouts just a year ago, who won a championship in the KHL. So he's proven over the course of his career that he is more than capable of, being a good goalie with a championship on the line. And who is the other goalie that the Islanders have? Semyon Varlamov. Okay, Varley, not in his prime anymore, just turned 36 in April. But still, it was Varlamov who came up big down the stretch. It was Varlamov last year who had a better season statistically. Granted, only played 28 games, starting 27 of them, but a .918 save percentage and a 2.60 goals against average. Those were his best numbers since 2020-2021, when he led the NHL with 7 shutouts. And in the playoffs, it was Varlamov who got the call. And I think you got to add something to the mix. And that is this. There is a friendship and a sort of mutual admiration society between Sorokin and Varlamov. Varlamov not only helped Sorokin on the ice, but when Sorokin arrived from Russia a few years back, Varlamov was there to, teach him the ropes about the NHL on the ice and living in the New York metropolitan area and in the United States off the ice. I think he is almost like an extra goaltending coach. And these two support each other. Sometimes your backup goalie and your starting goalie can have a competitive attitude that is negative. Sometimes it's positive. I think with this duo, it is positive. Lou Lamoriello likes to build his teams from the goal out. You look at his success in New Jersey many years ago. Martin Brodeur was the biggest reason that the Devils won the Stanley Cups they won and that they contended as long as they did. And then from there, he builds up a defense and then he tries to add the scoring. But let's face it, right now, for the New York Islanders, you're talking about a team that is also built from the goal out. If I had to say, forwards, defense, goaltending, what's the Islanders' strength? Goaltending, and it's not even a debate as far as the quality of the players, the depth. This goaltending duo is capable of being one of the best, if not the best, duos in the league. Where do they rank exactly if you sort of take all the other 31 other teams into consideration? We're going to debate that a little bit coming up in our next segment. Plus, we're going to look back at the Islanders' very first game in the Stanley Cup Final back in 1980 against the Philadelphia Flyers. And, oh yes, for our Islanders' birthday of the day, a goalie who was with the Islanders for only one season in the late 2000 teens, but really had an impact on and off the ice for this Islanders franchise. All that and more on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much, and I never want them to stop. But with the NBA and NHL playoffs no longer going on, we get fewer games, and the sports just aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Met fan, Yankee fan of some other major league team. Just check out the odds for your favorite team on FanDuel. Lots to bet on there. You got football futures to bet on now as training camps are opening up across pro football. So go over to FanDuel and check out the latest odds. Head to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel.com. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So where do the Islanders rank if you're looking at the best teams in the NHL as far as their goaltending tandem? I'm not talking about just, one good goalie, although obviously the starter is going to influence the analysis, a little bit more than the backup. But overall, I think the Islanders can match up with any team out there. Who are some of the teams that you got to consider to be among the best? Well, I think the Boston Bruins, Jeremy Swayman has been outstanding. I think they're in the conversation, although Joonas Korpisalo is now their backup. He really only had one really good season, so I can't say, oh yeah, they're number one, but they're certainly in the conversation. if Korpisalo can return to form, and playing in front of a better Bruins defense certainly won't hurt. So I think the Bruins are at least in the conversation. How about the Nashville Predators? I think they are in consideration as well. UC Saros, he didn't have a great year last year either, but he is still a darn good goalie. The Predators surprised a lot of teams last year. And they've got one of the best goalie prospects in the world right now in Yaroslav Askarov. Whether or not he'll pan out in the NHL is an interesting situation. He's only 22, so we'll see how that plays out. But again, Nashville definitely competing with the New York Islanders for the best goaltending duo in the league. Another team in the conversation for sure, the Winnipeg Jets. Connor Hellebuyck won the Vezina. Unbelievable goaltender right now. I mean, where would the Winnipeg Jets be without Connor Hellebuyck? Now, the issue, who's their backup? That's sort of up in the air still. So they may have the best single starting goalie in the NHL, but as far as the backup goes, sort of a wild card. And I think it's also safe to say, if you're sort of analyzing things now, that the Jets, the team they have in front of Hellebuyck, may not be as good this year as it was in recent seasons. Now, Hellebuyck seems to be one of those guys who thrives on, facing a lot of shots. But again, Hellebuyck and the Jets have got to be in the conversation if you're talking about the top goalies in the league. He's going to start 60 games, give or take, if he's healthy. They still need, to decide who's going to start the other 22 games, give or take, behind him. Regrettably, also got to mention the New York Rangers. Regrettably, why? Because Islander fans don't like to mention the New York Rangers unless it's just lost to the Islanders is following that sentence. But you got to admit, the Rangers have a very solid goaltending duo. And Igor Shesterkin and Jonathan Quick. I think Quick, as the backup, surprised a lot of people. Much like Varlamov, Quick did what a good backup does, and that is when the starter was kind of struggling last year for the Rangers, that was early in the season. Quick stepped up, played his best hockey, got more work, and then as Shesterkin rounded into form, you saw less and less of Quick. But look, Shesterkin led the Rangers to the President's Trophy last year. And, you got to think that he is among the best goalies in the league. Whether he's better than Sorokin when Sorokin is on his game, I think it's almost like a season-by-season debate. Last year, I think Shesterkin obviously was better than Sorokin. In 2022, 2023, I think you flip it. And I think that Sorokin was better than Shesterkin. These guys are also friends dating back to growing up in Russia and competing against each other to, in the KHL and in junior tournaments and what have you. They are friends. And I think, having them both in the league right now adds a little juice to the Islanders-Rangers rivalry, which always can use some juice. Always intense, but a little extra something never hurts. I think the Rangers are in the conversation for that top goaltending spot. But I think the Islanders are also right there. And, this year, maybe I'd rank the Islanders second. But if Sorokin returns to form, there is no reason the Islanders cannot be ranked number 1 in the league as having the best goaltending duo in the National Hockey League. I think the Islanders are definitely top 5. In fact, I'd say they're top 3. And I think you can make a really solid case that they are the best. It remains to be seen, which version of Ilya Sorokin we get on the ice this year. And the key for the Islanders, and everydayers, we've talked about it. If the Islanders are going to improve on last year, because the roster is more or less the same. Yes, you've added Anthony Duclair. Yes, you brought back Mike Riley. Yes, you have Maxim Siplakov, who's kind of a wild card. But overall, this is mostly the same roster as last year. If you want to get from 94 points to 100 points or more, you need Ilya Sorokin to bounce back and have one of his better seasons. And then if he does, I think the Islanders can make a really strong case for having the best goaltending duo in the National Hockey League. All right, we have got more to get to. We're going to go back and look at the very first Stanley Cup Final game in New York Islanders history. Islanders Flyers 1980. Doesn't get too much better than that. We'll also have our Islanders birthday of the day. All that and more still to come on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. The New York Islanders played in 5 consecutive Stanley Cup Finals from 1980 to 1984. And if you go back to 1975, the Islanders made the semifinals 3 years in a row, only got to the quarterfinals in 1978 where they were so shocked in 7 games by the Maple Leafs, got to the semifinals again in 1979, and then you had 5 straight runs to the Stanley Cup Final. It was huge when the Islanders finally made it. May 13th, 1980, the very first Stanley Cup Final game for the New York Islanders at the Spectrum in Philadelphia. Islanders with Billy Smith in goal, Pete Peters, the goalie for the Flyers. And after Mel Bridgman made it 1-0 Philadelphia, the very first goal in Islanders history, and I think this is very, very fitting, but the very first goal in Islanders history in a Stanley Cup Final came on the power play. Bob Daly was off for tripping for Philadelphia. Mike Bossy from Bryan Trottier. Doesn't get any more Islanders dynasty years than that. The Islanders took a 2-1 lead early in the second period on a goal by Denis Potvin with the assist to Clark Gillies and Butch Goring. Again, just all these great names from Islanders history. Bobby Clark tied it from late in the second period to make it 2-2. The Islanders fell behind 3-2 on a goal by Rick McLeish, Paul Holmgren with the assist. But with 3 minutes and 42 seconds left in regulation, the Islanders go on the power play. Al Hill is off for hooking, and Stefan Persson scores his third of the playoffs. Mike Bossy and Denis Potvin with the assist. The game goes to overtime. As Al Arbor used to say, who's going to be the hero? Well, the hero was Denis Potvin. His second of the game, third of the playoffs. Bob Nystrom and John Tonelli with the assists for Potvin, 2 goals and assist 6 shots on goal, which tied him with Mike Bossy for the team lead. Islanders win the game by a score of 4-3 and take a 1-0 lead in this best-of-7 Stanley Cup Final series. And I think this win was important. Getting a win in game 1 was huge. You needed, when you're the road team, you always need to split or want to split the first 2 games. But here was a Flyers team that had a lot more playoff and Stanley Cup experience than the Islanders. They had won the Cup in 74 and 75. They were in the final in 76. They made deep playoff runs after that. They had the best record in the NHL in 1980. For confidence reasons, winning game 1 was huge. After losing game 2, 8-3, you come back to the National Coliseum and take care of business there. Set you up with a 3-1 lead, and the Islanders end up, as we all know, winning in 6 games. 30 saves, by the way, for Billy Smith in this game. But, who are the heroes? Denis Potvin, Mike Bossy, Bryan Trottier, Stefan Persson, all the names that made this team great, contributing, or many of the names anyway, contributing to this big win. And the Islanders would go on to win the first of 4 Stanley Cup championships after this very first game in Stanley Cup Final history, in the history of the New York Islanders. All right, time now for our Islanders birthday of the day, and this guy is a fan favorite. Today is the 33rd birthday of former Islanders goalie Robin Lehner. Lehner, a native of Gothenburg, Sweden, second-round pick of the Ottawa Senators back in 2009. Made his NHL debut in 2010-2011. 6'4", 250. Nice size for a goalie. Stayed with the Senators until the end of the 14-15 season, then went on to Buffalo and joined the Islanders in 2018-2019. Later played for Chicago and Vegas. Lehner was only on the island for 1 year, had a 2.13 goals against average and a .930 save percentage in 46 games. Really became a fan favorite based on what he overcame off the ice and how he resurrected his career on the island. I think there was a real bond between Robin Lehner and the fans on Long Island. For a guy who was only here 1 year, he really had an impact on the New York Islanders. One of his better games with the Isles, February 23rd, 2019 at the Rogers Arena in Vancouver. Islanders and the Canucks, obviously Robin Lehner, the goalie for the Isles. Jacob Markstrom in between the pipes for Vancouver. And the Islanders get goals from 4 different players. In fact, nobody had more than 1 point in this game. You had Casey Cizikas, Ryan Polak, Anthony Beauvillier, and Cal Clutterbuck scoring the goals. But the big story, a 36-save shutout for Robin Lehner as the Islanders blank the Vancouver Canucks 4-0. Robin Lehner, who overcame so much and endeared himself to New York Islander fans, both as a player and as a person. He is our Islanders birthday of the day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Everydayers, again, we will have more on the Islanders draft class, plus the latest Islanders news, notes, and happenings. Still waiting on the Oliver Wahlstrom arbitration, and hopefully before then, a move or a trade. We will keep you posted, and obviously we'll also update you on X as soon as something breaks. Until then, have a great day, everybody. Stay safe, and of course, let's go Islanders.